of A Wild Mystery Podcast appears, where we discuss mysteries, histories, and occasionally conspiracies. I'm your host, Belle.
And I'm your co-host, Ollie.
Today, we are reviewing the case of the Screaming Mummy.
Today's content warnings are as follows: death, suicide, body handling, mummies, and the mummification process. If any of these disturb you and you don't think you can listen, head on over to our website and you can listen to any of our previous episodes. Hey, it's Editing Ollie coming in just to let you guys know we do bulk recording sessions because we have busy lives, but unfortunately the Monday before this recording session, I tested positive for COVID. So to avoid spreading it, we decided to film or record, separately for the first time ever. So there might be some odd feedback. Audio might not sync up quite, right. We did the best that we could. But we just wanted to give you a quick disclaimer. I'm feeling fine. And next time, things will be better. So, hope you guys still enjoy. Stay safe.
All right, everybody, I'm going to do the best that I can with pronunciations today, but some of these are hard. So please be patient with me. I'm going to do what I can to make it not painful to your ears. So, to get us started, in 1881, the Deir al-Bahari royal cache was discovered in Luxor, where priests of the 21st and 22nd dynasties hid the corpses of royal members from previous dynasties to protect them from grave robbers. The cache of the Deir al-Bahari royal cache included a mummy that was dubbed the Screaming Mummy. Now, it is important to note here that I am addressing two different mummies. One is described as the Screaming Mummy, and the other one is described as the Screaming Woman Mummy. I'll mostly be focusing on the woman, but wanted to build a background as to how she was discovered. Now, recent studies have been conducted with CT scans and with DNA panels to determine that the identity of the male Screaming Mummy is actually Prince Pentawere, the son of King Ramses III. Now, Prince Pentawere was forced to commit suicide by hanging as a punishment for his involvement in the murder of his father, Ramses. This act of treason is known as the harem plot.
Damn.
Yeah, right? And because I'll go ahead and just toss it in there because I think it's kind of interesting, is so basically King Ramses III, he was actually, his throat was slit. Horrible way to die.
Yeah, geez.
Yeah, so I didn't look too much into that, but I did see that little tidbit, so I thought I'd just toss that in there. Now, in further disgrace, Pentawere was punished more by not having a correct mummification performed on his body, and they wrapped it in sheepskin.
So this was all... That was all intentional, I'm assuming.
Oh, very much so.
Okay.
So this is taken to mean that he was considered unclean and was destined to be condemned to hell in the afterlife. Whereas normal mummies would be wrapped carefully in white linen.
So he would be condemned to hell because of being wrapped in sheepskin?
Of the murder.
Oh, okay.
No, because of the murder plot.
Yeah, that's fair.
They were just basically saying,
I don't think his soul would be lighter than a feather.
Huh?
Aren't your souls, the Egyptian belief, your soul is supposed to be lighter than the feather?
No, it's supposed to be equal.
Okay, never mind then. His soul would not be equal, but...
Yeah. No, it's I don't know if it's necessarily supposed to be lighter or equal, because, like, one, I'm not an expert in Egyptology, or Egyptian mythology. I know a lot, but there's also, like, I'm never 100% sure where I pulled that information from, so I always just, like, refer back to it. Mm-hmm. So, to clarify, I'm not sure, and I do get into it a little bit later. Again, generalization of resources, as these things varied based on the time and who was the pharaoh. So, bear that in mind. But he was considered to be condemned to hell because of the murder plot, or because of treason, and to disgrace him and his body further, he was wrapped in sheepskin instead of white linen.
So, like, it would not matter what he was wrapped in, essentially. So they just, like, went ahead and were like, we might as well just not even care.
Yeah, eternally fuck you, basically. An eternal fuck you. Hopefully your body gets lost on its way to the Duat.
Yeah, although I'm surprised they even mummified him at all.
Well, based on what I can figure out, they didn't. And I get into this a little bit later. Because, so basically, like, he was mummified basically because, so there's different stages of mummification, because there's actual mummification that actually occurs even today in, like, the real world, because it's like,
it's kind of just like
basically mummification
occurs
when when the body dries out.
Okay, yeah.
But the mummification process that we're addressing today is specifically the process in which the Egyptians went through to go ahead and
like an intentional process.
Correct. So he was unintentionally mummified as a specific, like, physical reaction of what happened, but he was disgraced in his death practice.
Okay.
Is basically. But like I said, he's more of just like, oh, hey, cool. He and her are referred to as the Screaming Mummies, but like I said, to me, hers was a lot more interesting.
And are you going to get into why they're referred to as the Screaming Mummies?
Kind of. So for him, okay, so if you look up the Screaming Mummy, you're going to see a couple of pictures. So, because one is of him and the other is of her. So both of them have their jaws agape, and so it looks like they died in terror.
Okay.
Which is why they're called the Screaming Mummies.
It's the position. Okay.
Correct. No sounds came out of them.
Thank Christ.
Literally in this case.
Thank Ra.
So, huh?
Thank Ra. Or
yes.
I don't know who you would thank, and I studied art history.
Think Osiris?
I know Anubis is the one that weighs your soul, right? But I don't know.
Anubis weighs your soul.
Whatever Egyptian god has dominion over whether or not mummies make sound. Yeah.
Deals with that. Or was it, hold on. No, I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah.
Nope.
We can't get into this. We're fucking nerds.
Egyptian mythology is a whole other beast.
Yeah.
That I'm not covering today. But I will cover later because I love Egyptian mythology.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that same royal cache, another mummy was found known as the Screaming Woman Mummy. Her head is tilted to the right side, and her legs are slightly bent and are crossed at the ankles. Typically, mummies are closed-mouthed and placed in a straight position. As a result of her head being like tilted to the right side, like I said, her mouth is also agape.
Okay.
Now, the real question is, why is she buried this way, so different from other mummies for that time? To find out more, we need to determine what mummification is and what we know about the process itself and how it relates to the process in which mummification was performed by ancient Egyptians.
So, you don't know, because I know for a lot of this stuff, like, the reason that we know so much about, like, the mummification process and death practices of ancient
Egyptians, yeah,
is because that's what was preserved as much. So we don't know much about, like, we don't know as much, I should say, about the just, like, daily lives of ancient Egyptians. But
correct. So most of our resources when it comes to mummification and how it relates back to ancient Egypt comes from how royal and prestigious figures such as the pharaohs were mummified. Now, from what I could gather, the general public still went through a mummification process, but it was not followed as intricately or as
They weren't buried with all their riches.
ornately
Yeah.
as the pharaohs
Well,
and their
they
families.
might have been buried with all their riches, but it wasn't as much as like the pharaohs.
Correct.
So like,
They don't
I
get a whole
mean,
pyramid.
what I'm you might have to cut this out because this might not even matter to the episode, but like there is I have a minor in art history from an art school because I'm a fucking nerd. But one of the
You're
things
not
that
a nerd, you're talented.
yeah, one of the things that we talked about is that a lot of the stuff that we know about ancient civilizations, like we have this idea that ancient civilizations were really, really, yeah, listen, we have this idea that
Sorry.
ancient civilizations are really like focused on death, but that's the only reason that we have that idea is because the stuff that we know about ancient civilizations, God, it surrounds death because that is what we have found. So, like,
And that's what we have to pull from. And
yeah,
that's
we
actually,
find, you know,
interestingly, if I'm going to relate this back to your art degree, is that the reason we are able to identify where certain civilizations came from, or to determine if someone actually lived there, is based on pottery.
bitch, you should have. I love how enthusiastic you are about this. You should have studied art history. I was so excited.
Well,
I switched to an art history major for a second, but then I was like, wait, hold on. I don't know what I can do with this
well,
degree.
it's because I'm obsessed with Atlantis.
Yeah. But
And it's just
like
things you learn along the way.
there's like but there's the amount that we know about Egypt, you learn a lot that like, oh, the ancient Egyptians, they were so focused on death. It was such a massive part of their lives. But the like you have to question, was that actually true, or is it just we know so much about the death practices of ancient Egypt and we just don't know a whole lot about the other stuff, you know? And it's
Yeah.
I think we can ask that question about a lot of different ancient civilizations because like the mummification process, it's things like um that is it's so specific and it has such a like it would have such a cultural impact on
Significance.
yeah, it is important culturally that the mummification process is performed correctly, but is it so it would be written down is what I'm saying. It would be written down in multiple sources. But like is it culturally important? Like there was a civilization, I don't remember which. I think it's Greek that had you had the salt shaker, you had the pepper shaker, and then there was a third shaker. And nobody
Oh
knows
my god, I know exactly what you're talking about.
nobody
Ah!
knows what that third shaker is for because culturally it would have been obvious. So who the fuck would write down, "Oh yeah, we've got our salt shaker, our pepper shaker, our fucking saffron shaker, whatever." It wouldn't have been saffron because saffron's expensive as shit. But like
Oh god, what is it? It's the lost city of not Atlantis. It's is it Punt?
I don't know what you're
Oh
talking.
my god, I have to look this up before I forget about it.
We're this is going to be one of those episodes where we're going to enthuse about some shit
Yeah.
cuz like this stuff is so
Oh, it is Punt.
interesting.
Oh, I was right. Ah!
Oh
Okay,
cool.
sorry.
I've never heard of
This
that. You need to do an episode on that one too.
okay, I will try
You
and
guys should
keep
see her
it.
physical reaction to this. Okay,
I
moving on. Follow the script.
to specify, kind of expanding off of what you said regarding like no one knows what the third salt shaker was. You look back to it and how it relates to for example, for Romans and how they created concrete,
Yeah.
because it just says seawater. Now, no one ever specified that it just says water, because why wouldn't you use water from the sea? And that's something that they actually had to physically test for. They had to break down the concrete in Rome and notice that they actually used seawater because the concrete in Rome is a lot stronger than modern concrete, and that's the reason why. Anyway,
Damn.
so it's like because you wouldn't think to write down that ingredient. For
Mhm.
example, here's food for thought for everybody. How many recipes do you read a day or ever that just say eggs? We
Oh,
don't
yeah.
specify chicken.
Mhm.
We know we mean chicken, but nobody specifies chicken eggs.
100 years ago, would it have been as obvious?
Exactly.
100
Or
years ago in
100
a
years
different
from
part of the
now.
world. Yeah.
So, anyway, yes, Lost City of Punt, story for
So
another
if you
day.
keep a super detailed, super boring journal, you're going to be a historian's favorite person in 2,000 years. That's basically what we're
Absolutely.
saying.
Yes, exactly. Although, if you could do me a favor, could you add punt to my list somewhere so I don't
Yes.
forget it? I'm so excited. I love that. Coming back down. Okay. The mummification process. I'm going to do the best that I can to keep this as simple and as cursory as possible. But mummification is a very in-depth, detailed process, and this is important to note again that this is a generalization of mummification, because it very much related to who was the pharaoh at the time, what dynasty it was, and what area you were in, as well as like the luxuries that you could be afforded based on your wealth status.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind. The person dies. Notifications are made. Family tells who they all need to. Okay, that part's done. Now we get to the more detailed stuff. So, embalming the body. Now, embalming a body in ancient times is very different than embalming a body in modern day. So, basically, this took place in a special tent called an ibu. I apologize if I mispronounced that. It's spelled IBU. The body would be then cleansed with palm wine and then rinsed using water from the Nile. This was an important step as it was done to purify the body. Uh, we'll go ahead and give you a warning. This is where things start to get a little bit more gory. So if you are not into that but still interested in the topic, please skip ahead. I'm going to leave space for an editing note for a timestamp to skip to here. Hey, it's Future Bell. Skip to 2030. Go ahead.
I remember that this stuff freaks me out sometimes, so if I make noises, that's why.
Okay. I try to keep it as non-descriptive
Okay.
as possible because it's, well, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next step of the mummification process is they removed your brain. Uh, and it was not, at the time, it was not seen as an important organ. So it was actually thrown away. The way that they removed your brain was they stuck a stick, a hook with a hook up your nose, and they took it out through your nose,
Yeah, this is the
and
part
it
that's
was put
really
in water to dissolve. For anybody who doesn't know, the brain, after your body dies, it basically kind of. I'm sorry, I can see your face.
I hate this stuff
If
so
you
much.
if you touch it, it'll dissolve. So they put it in water
Okay.
to dissolve. I'm sorry. Moving on. They would then.
That's
Do you need a minute?
that stuff is probably gonna be the worst. But
Okay.
okay, go for it.
Um, they would then remove internal organs through a cut on the left side of the body.
Yeah,
The
see, that's
lungs,
better
liver,
to me for
stomach.
some reason than, like, removing your brain through a hook up your nose. That's just really I don't know why that is so I hate that so much, but
I think it's because of the imagery that it
yeah.
produces.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, look, I've thought about that process many times over my life because, and I still don't have an image that I've ever set with it. I just think that it wouldn't be so bad if, like,
It's like
I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna
nose
stop.
nose stuff freaks me out, so, like
Okay, there you go. That's why. Um, okay, so they would then remove the internal organs through a cut on the left side of the body. The lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines were removed and placed in individual coffins, which are called canopic jars. After removing the organs, the inside of the body was then cleansed with lotions, palm oil, and preserving fluid. The body was then packed with linen and straw to keep their form intact. I also noted somewhere that they, depending on like the status of the deceased, or if like they were like well loved, other items might be like put in there, like a jar of perfume or something. I
okay.
don't know if that's necessarily true, but there were reports of that.
I was gonna say before I got really skeezed out at the last point that, like, it hype like, generally speaking, when you're dead, your brain isn't very important anymore, is it? So,
Nope.
yeah.
Um, so uh, the canopic jars represented the four sons of Horus. Please excuse my butchering of some of these names. Um, Happy watched over the lungs and had the head of a baboon. Um, Dwamutef looked after the stomach and was depicted with a jackal head. You see that next one?
Yeah, good fucking luck. Quebec.
No. Cabes Senwef projected the intestines and had the head of a falcon. And Imset guarded the liver and was shown with a human head. Which, depending on how you look at mythology and how it relates back to like how images are depicted, I'm surprised that they used a human head for that one. Because
Yeah.
there's a belief somewhere that, you know, if you make an image too human, it can come to life and possess you.
Huh. Okay.
It's why you know. Anyway. Um so the organs were placed in those jars. So moving on, the body would then be placed on a tilted slab and covered with natron salts. Natron absorbed water from the body, which was collected in a bowl. I don't know why it was collected in a bowl, and frankly, I was too scared to search it. So moving on. Um, Rotting of the body was prevented by removing moisture. Um, and for 40 days, the body would be laid outside to dry. I was personally surprised by the length of time of that.
Yeah.
But who knew?
Man, the places where they did this, like the buildings, they must have stunk.
Well, and they did say it was outside, so.
Well, yeah, but I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is true. I'm imagining like it just being out in the back of the mortician building, you know.
Uh, okay. The Eye of Horus was positioned over the abdomen slit, and the body was blessed. Hundreds of yards of linen were used. Fingers and toes were wrapped individually. Charms and papyrus were arranged inside the layers to help protect the body.
And this is after that 40
Basically,
days, right?
after the 40 days,
Okay.
yes. And this was to help prevent possession from evil spirits.
Good.
Priests would write on the linen layers and would recite ritual prayers. All wrappings were held together by a binding shroud.
Is
I
that
don't know how to pronounce this, so
so that's
go
just
ahead.
like a belt, basically a binding shroud.
I think so.
Okay.
Like I said, this
That's yeah. It's like
generalizations,
something kind of wrapped around it. It's not like
yeah,
glue, you
basically.
know.
Yeah. Well, funny that you say that.
Oh, good.
Mumia.
Good. This I don't know why like listen, I took biology and physiology classes and I had to go through a it because it was an online class because COVID, and I got it anyway. But anyway, um, so there was a digital corpse that we had to use because we had to know like what the parts actually look like in a body, which is good for me because that's kind of what I'm going through. The going through the what like the going through the digital corpse, which is pictures of an actual corpse, by the way, did not skeeze me out as much as this. I don't know why.
I don't know, man. um, so Mamiya, or which is a type of glue, was finally applied to hold it all together. Cosmetics and artificial eyes were used on the mummy's face um, to clarify over all of the wrappings.
Okay.
Um, and a portrait mask would cover the mummy's head. So this allowed the dead person's soul to recognize its body, and then the body was finally placed in a decorated coffin. So basically, the reason for that is, um, in ancient Egypt, it was believed that your body and soul had to like be together until you like made your journey to the afterlife.
Yeah, I
And
think I
so
remember.
it needed to be able to like, yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember that your soul, the belief is that your soul wanders at night, but to return to your body, it has to be able to recognize the body
Mhm. Yeah.
and know where it is.
Yeah. Um So then finally, you can kind of begin the more ceremonial process of a burial, which is so friends and family were to walk through town, and this is how it's literally specified, crying on their way to the tomb.
Okay.
The more mourners was meant, the greater the dead's chance at entering the afterworld. Um, Before being placed in the tomb, the opening of the mouth ceremony occurred. The family recited spells, and the priest touched different parts of the mummy's face. This ceremony allowed the mummies to eat, see, hear, and move in the afterlife.
You
Um,
should look over at my
Inside,
video right now.
oh yeah, I see her. She's
Don't you dare.
perched.
Okay.
You're like, no. Placed in the burial chamber would be the Book of the Dead, the canopic jars, and other belongings of the deceased. The Book of the Dead contained 200 spells and instructions for reaching eternal life. Weighing of the heart occurred after the tomb was sealed and was witnessed by no one. The heart was the most powerful part of the person and was the center of a person's being. The heart was never removed from the body because it was used to judge one's life.
Okay, so the
Now,
weighing of the heart, that would be like the one that is done by Anubis,
correct.
I
Yeah,
think.
so this next bit kind of goes into the
Okay.
more uh mythological aspect of belief. So gods of the underworld would judge the heart on how well one behaved in life. Um, so I will say this is kind of a part that diverges from parts that I have read, but I'm going to go ahead and go based off the resource that I pulled from. Like I said, generalization. I'm not an expert on ancient Egyptian mythology. Um, the goddess of truth, Maat, Maat, weighed the heart against the feather of truth. Anubis, god of the underworld, made all final judgments, and if the heart balanced the feather, eternal life would be granted. If not, the soul was doomed, and the heart was fed to the monster Ammit. Which, just kind of because I really love this, is like, so front legs of a lion, back legs of a hippo, and mouth of a crocodile. I just think it's really
I love him,
entertaining
yes.
and just really cool. Um, like I said, like
A
Egyptian
good
mythology.
boy.
So good boy. Um, okay, now moving back on specifically to our screaming woman mummy. Now, the main people who were researching her and kind of the reasons why she was buried the way that she was and kind of the position that her body was found in. Zahi Hawass and Sahir Salim, um, who is a professor of radiology at Cairo University, carried out a study on her and examined her body using the Simmons CT machine located in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Writings in Heretic on linen scrolls refer to her as the royal daughter, the royal sister, Meritamen. Um, However, many princesses were named this, so they have left her listed as unknown for now, as they could not distinguish exactly which princess she was.
So so she was wrapped in linen.
Correct, yes. So
Okay.
she, um, and so this, again, next little bit here. So
Okay.
the results of the CT scan show a woman who died in her 60s, and that unlike Prince Pentawere, that she received great care during her mummification. It shows that she was cared for and was not disgraced like he was. Um, uh, da, 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 da. Biologically speaking, her CT scan shows that she was that she was infected with severe atherosclerosis, which affected many of the arteries in her bodies. Now, atherosclerosis is a degenerative disease that progressively affects the arterial wall, leading to the narrowing of the cavity and the blockage of the blood vessel. It can be seen on a CT scan in areas with high calcification within the artery walls.
Okay.
Now, the CT scan that they had done showed that she had suffered from stiffness in the right and left coronary arteries, as well as neck arteries and the abdominal and iliac aorta, in addition to the arteries of the lower extremities and legs.
And
Now,
just for reference, all of those specific arteries that were just mentioned, they are very, very important arteries. Generally, they're the ones that like you
they
would
keep
or
bodily
those two.
function going.
Yeah, they like if you've heard of like the three different ways that we feel for a pulse, those are two of the three like major arteries that you would check for a pulse. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I was doing that. I was just jamming out in my head here. uh, so, also, by the way, did you know that ancient Egyptians actually did recognize heart attacks as a clinical condition?
Oh.
Like they actually like knew what it was.
Well, I mean, they were doing a lot of
Hmm.
dissection basically, you know.
Oh yeah, it was cool.
I'm sure they
Um,
understood, yeah,
they
more about the
understood.
human body than a lot of places a lot
Yeah,
of
it was so
civilizations did.
yeah. What I did read had recognized like that um ancient Egypt healers and clinicians would recognize like specifically in men like the arm, the heart, like or the stiffness in the arm, and kind of relating those symptoms that we currently recognize um, of symptoms of a heart attack in men, that they had recognized those symptoms as well. And I believe they called it
Yeah.
WAD, but I might be incorrect on that, so do not quote me. Um, Now, numerous modern clinical studies have demonstrated that coronary hardening disease of the heart is the leading cause of sudden death in adults. Modern medicine is recommending in such a serious medical condition, similar to the case of the woman's screaming mummy, to give medicines that dissolve blood, vessel clots, and possibly a cardiac catheterization.
Hmm.
Catheterization. This is to prevent or reduce damage to the heart muscle. Now, Zahi and Salim Zahi and Salim assumes that the coronary vascular thrombosis shown in her CT caused damage to the heart muscle, which led to her sudden death. They believe that she did die of a sudden heart attack, likely in the position that her mummy was found in. The heart attack likely caused her head to tilt to the right and the jaw muscles to relax, which, of course, opened the mouth. Evidence indicates that she lay lifeless for a long period of time in the above position before her body was eventually discovered.
Okay.
The post-death spasticity stiffened the muscles and joints and kept the princess's mummy in this position for thousands of years. And of course, this process is more commonly known as rigor mortis. Um, So, personally, my guess is that she likely had a heart attack in the evening after her staff left her for the evening, and that her body wasn't discovered until the morning. As a result, rigor mortis would have set in and made it so that her mouth couldn't be closed, and they were unable to move the
Oh,
body
okay.
into its normal burial position, which were the legs uncrossed, and depending on the time frame, the arms crossed over the chest, or as later depicted, the arms were crossed a little bit lower on the chest. Just
Okay.
depended on what time
Yeah,
frame.
the time period basically.
Yeah. So they are still conducting research and hope to identify more information and hopefully identify this unnamed, not unnamed because they have her name, but like
Yeah. But
specifically
like
identify which princess and who her parents were.
yeah.
So that way we can kind of get a better clue as to who she was. Um, so nothing super crazy today. Obviously, a lot of death handling for people who might be uncomfortable with that topic. Um,
Like
but
apparently me.
you, but did you find anything interesting about this case?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize, I guess, that this is dumb. I didn't realize that rigor mortis didn't go away. So I guess it's
I'm not
interesting
laughing at you. I just am like, okay.
yeah, which is yeah, I mean, so I guess that's interesting to me that it it just would have kept her in that position for so long.
Mhm.
Um,
If you scroll down to the bottom, there's pictures.
yeah. I would put that CT scan one first
Yeah.
in, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we don't jump scare people.
Yeah.
Here's a mummy.
Yeah.
Boo.
Boo, yeah.
um,
And I always think it's cool when they use medical imagery to learn about stuff like this.
mhm.
I think medical imagery is cool anyway cuz I mean, that's the field I'm going into.
Well, I mean, it's terribly interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many things that we wouldn't know about ancient civilizations if we didn't do
Mhm.
biological testing or if we didn't do
The
in-depth
scans and
CT scans and, an MRIs to kind of determine all of these things. And we wouldn't. And then there's a lot of techniques that we've been able to bring back from ancient history, if you will, that have
mhm.
actually been able to better, the community now. Like,
Yeah.
you know, because they were onto something. They weren't dumb.
Yeah. Well, cuz I mean there would be a reason that um ancient civilizations continued to do something for years and years and years. And sometime I think a lot of times we as modern people tend to believe, oh, it's just superstition. That's why they kept doing, X. Is it?
Was
Like,
it really? Or were
because
they
I mean,
onto
okay,
something?
there are certain things that certainly like they they treated things, especially medical conditions, like that way for so long because they just didn't have anything better to do. And now we do. And if people say like, well, but in, you know, the year 100 they were doing X, so clearly that means that the appeal to ancient wisdom is a fallacy. But there are times when they were right.
Yeah. Hey, when you're right, and sometimes they were
Yeah.
on it. Thanks for listening to today's episode of A Wild Mystery Podcast Appears. This has been the review of The Screaming Mummy.
We hope you join us next week and check out our social media to see our notes and pictures from today's episode. All of that social media can be found on our website at awmpa.com. Stay safe.